Some information presented in this series is based on theory. These theories are not the only possible interpretations. If you enjoy this content, please spread the word about visionary ventures. Hello, welcome to the first episode of my playlist, Dramatica. Now, what is Dramatica and why am I so interested in explaining it? As a craftsman, I want to understand film structure. Practically, the first 20 years of my life were spent writing stories. As a college student, I had been writing some television and movie scripts. Then I tried to write a screenplay with Madonna playing herself. It had to be phenomenal, top-notch, to win her respect. Plus, there were so many thematic aspects I wanted to explore in the film. With all that potential, it would be a disaster if the screenplay couldn't flow, if it couldn't easily grasp the audience. So I sent my screenplay to Creative Artists Agency. They sent a letter back saying it wasn't something they were interested in. So I committed myself to understanding the structure of film. I read some of those books out there that tell you about how to write a film, but they didn't explain structure in depth. I didn't feel like my creative instincts were being guided well. Then I discovered Dramatica. It's different from anything I had read about. Far different. It's not just a piece of software that helps you create a story, to structure a story. There's an entire theory behind it. Okay, so what's this theory? It uses how our minds think in order to predict a huge amount of what you would see in a film. Well, I knew what I wanted to say. I just wanted some guidance on how to effectively communicate it. Now, here's some brief history on the theory. It begins at the University of Southern California. Two students got together to make a film in 1980. Chris Huntley had already directed a few short films. Melanie Phillips, who at that time went by a different name, had created a new movie project. So she partnered with Chris as producer. Chris was the producer. They filmed The Strangeness, and it's okay as a narrative, but they decided that before creating a new one, they should figure out how to better design a film. Here's the magic. They didn't rely on other books about writing movies. They pieced together some common tropes from films and some psychological principles. Chris and Melanie decided to split for a while after starting this off to get some life experience. So Chris continues working in the film industry, and I read something about him working on IMAX movies, and that was from Melanie Phillips' blog. I don't know anything else about it, but I'm putting it out there that he was still in the industry, apparently. He goes and he co-founds a software company with Stephen Greenfield called the Wright Brothers. In fact, the Wright Brothers produced the first computer program that screenwriters use for formatting scripts. And before I discovered Dramatica, I had come across this software. It's called Movie Magic Screenwriter. And it did help me, in fact. Now, since then, there are other screenwriting format programs. You probably already know about Word, and there was WordPerfect before that, and Pages for Mac. Simply text editor program where you open it up and you simply type and it creates a document for you. Well, this takes it one step further. These ones, there's Final Draft and Movie Magic Screenwriter, and there are a few other ones. It's something like MS Word, Microsoft Word, but it includes certain commands that a screenwriter would need. Like, for example, there's a format for a script page. It's a standard format. The character name would appear in the center, and then the dialogue is along the center. It's a little bit wider than the column that you'd use for the name, and taking up the entire length of the script page, the width of the script page, is the description. He invites Melanie to sit and discuss the endeavor of understanding how movies are told. It's been 10 years, now it's 1991. They spend 6 months asking each other questions about how people behave, motivations, and so forth. However, what didn't gel together was an overall scheme. In other words, it wasn't an overall theory. It was just little points. So at some point, they do find a theory. They soon design a model of how our minds work through a conflict. You know how Watson and Crick figured out the structure of DNA? Well, that's something like what happened with Chris and Melanie. Their plan was to incorporate this theory into a book. But Chris and his software partner, Stephen Greenfield, became intrigued with the idea of producing this as a new computer program. Now I'm going to share how you can use this theory to understand stories better. Even if you're not a writer, it'll help you understand the next film you watch. I wanted to share this, and since my channel has already been about understanding oneself better, psychology, it fits right in. So let's get to it. This theory has a lot to it, but it's not difficult to understand as you get the hang of it. A lot of the calculations you can do in your head. Did I say calculations? What do I mean? I'm going to use the term story mind often. The Dramatica software calculates a story form with all sorts of values for a given story. What's the main character's problem? What's the objective story problem? Is the main character a type that changes ultimately? The software gives you a report of all these different values. A huge chunk of this report involves the periodic table. Here's the periodic table for Dramatica. For right now, we'll say this represents the mind at rest, with no conflict. Stories are about conflict with characters. They can't have both. There's a struggle between two values. Dramatica says that what a story really is the mind tackling one conflict through 4 perspectives. We'll talk about these perspectives very soon. It's one of the easiest things to understand. The very act of tackling conflict twists this periodic table. Think of a Rubik's Cube becoming twisted. Some parts become distorted. Well, all of it becomes distorted. So the theory predicts what a particular story will look like. Distorted specifically in the way you want your story to be told. Now, these are the 4 perspectives. You've seen them before in films. In fact, a story that explores its central conflict fully will explore through these 4 perspectives. Dramatica calls them through lines. We have the objective story, the subjective story, the main character, the impact character. Those are the 4. This is where people, even those who describe how to write film, confuse the terminology. I'll describe precisely what the differences are. All 4 perspectives, all 4 through lines, progress in parallel. Now, the story you're watching is actually fluctuating between these 4 as they progress. A little bit through this through line, then a little bit of that through line, and maybe a scene would contain a couple of these through lines in the same scene. The objective story is about the whole landscape of the story. In Jaws, it's about dealing with the shark threatening beach vacationers. It's not about the main character's personal fear of the water. In Star Wars, it's the rebels trying to transport stolen plans to their hidden base so they can destroy the Death Star. In Ghostbusters, it's about the team of Ghostbusters capturing ghosts, of course, and ultimately confronting Gozer. Very interesting story. E.T. is about an alien stranded on Earth, trying to get home. Rocky's objective through line is only about the boxing match itself, the goal of showcasing a captivating match. The through line for Pretty Woman is a bit more complex. It's about a company being stripped and sold. Now, First Blood is about a sheriff pursuing an escaped Vietnam vet. The main character through line is the audience's perspective into the story. What makes this different is that it's the personal side of the main character. In Jaws, the police chief has a personal fear of the water. In Star Wars, Luke is the main character because we bond most closely with him. We follow his arc through the story as he's frustrated being stuck on a farm. We learn about his father as he learns. So we don't know that much more. The two of us are in sync. He wants to avenge his father's death. He wants to become a hero rather than stay on the farm. In Ghostbusters, Peter is the main character. He has this arc of conflict that's not directly involved in the objective story of busting ghosts. It's him beginning as someone focused on getting laid with any woman he can. When he meets Dana Barrett, the impact character, I'll talk about impact characters later on. When he meets Dana Barrett, her presence motivates him, impacts upon him, to demonstrate that he's interested in her for more than just a one-night stand. In E.T., although the objective story is about a stranded alien, we bond with Elliot as he's a younger brother dealing with a father who deserted the family. In Rocky, Sylvester Stallone is clearly portraying the main character. We see intimate moments with him that have nothing to do with the objective story. He's struggling to reach a better life for himself, trying to prove to himself and everyone else that he's not just another bum from the streets. The main character in Pretty Woman may be difficult to pinpoint, however. Is it played by Richard Gere or Julia Roberts? Often in romantic comedies, it's tricky because there's so much focus on both of the characters. It's Julia Roberts because we see her in several moments of the film dealing with her own personal conflict that doesn't relate to the objective story. Her character, Vivian, is struggling to deal with people only treating her as a prostitute. She's trying to move into a better life. Now, in First Blood, Rambo is still suffering from PTSD after, I believe he says, 7 years. I must point out two very common misconceptions here about the main character. It doesn't have to be the same character as the protagonist. Remember, the protagonist is the one pursuing the objective story goal. There's a whole series of characters that are involved in the objective story. Now, they may also appear as the main character or impact character. Well, two of them may appear as the main character and impact character in the other through lines. But in the objective story, that's not their function. The characters are playing a different function in the objective story. The main character is the one we bond with and personally follow during the story, as opposed to the protagonist, as I said before, that pursues the objective story goal. They are usually played by the same character. For example, in Star Wars, Luke Skywalker is both the protagonist and the main character. There are precisely different moments. There's a function that he's fulfilling in the objective story as he pursues the story goal. However, there are other moments in which he's the main character and he's not fulfilling the objective story. He's not pursuing the story goal. He's letting us bond with him as the main character. Another misconception is that the main character must change. I'll talk about this in another video. It's true the main character's progress must arc. He or she must struggle through conflict. However, here is the special relationship between the main and impact character through lines. As a story begins, the main character becomes motivated to deal with his conflict a certain way. It's the only way he knows how. He witnesses this impact character going through a similar conflict. Now, the conflict isn't exactly the same, but you can see the similarities between the two. Seeing those similarities is something else we'll learn about in a future video. This is why you have so many romantic subplots in movies. It's usually the main character through line and impact character through line being expressed. They don't have to be romantic. We don't bond with the impact character. we see and we learn more about the impact character through the eyes of the main character. So, Obi-Wan Kenobi is the impact character on Luke in Star Wars. The alien makes an impact on Elliot in E.T. In First Blood. The sheriff makes an impact on Rambo. They're confronting similar personal conflict, but with different methods, different outlooks on how the conflict should be dealt with. The main character has a choice, whether to continue dealing with his personal problem the same way he always has, or to shift into the attitude of the impact character. You might have noticed moments when a character tells the other, "You and I are alike." I'll tell you in a future video about this, how this similarity can be designed. But know that this commonality between the two through lines is why many movies have that moment. Now, the fourth through line is the subjective story. It's the progress in character relationships that aren't between the main and impact character. For example, in Back to the Future, Marty makes a huge impact on his father George to stick up for himself. That's a case, by the way, where Marty as main character is not the one who changes. It's the impact character who does. The subjective story relationships in Back to the Future progress nicely. There's Biff and Lorraine. There's Marty's impact on Doc Brown, showing that Doc Brown will eventually succeed in his scientific efforts. There's also the Lorraine and Marty relationship. Okay. Next episode, we're going to explore the periodic table. Each of these through lines has to be assigned to a corner of the table. It's going to be fun learning how you can assign these in your head. You can do it. I can do it. It's easy. You'll learn how to see where they fit as you're watching someone else's movie. So until then, stay safe, and I can't wait until we meet again to explore Dramatica further. If you enjoy this content, please spread the word about Visionary Ventures.